What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. Hope your Monday is going along well so far. And I think it's about time we talk about Kenny McIntosh a little bit. We got to talk about Kenny McIntosh, one of the best preseason performers for the Seahawks so far through two games. He's clearly been the most productive running back. He showed a lot of impressive things to his game, and he looks like the player that we were hoping we would get when we drafted him over a year ago. So, obviously, even in an extreme scenario, Kenny McIntosh is not going to be a huge part of the 2024 Seahawks, but he could be a significant part of the 2024 Seahawks. So, we got to figure out exactly how that can work. So, through two preseason games, Kenny McIntosh has had multiple good runs. I will say the offensive line has mostly done a really good job in front of him, but he showed elusiveness, he showed fight, he showed some power, he showed the ability to catch passes out of the backfield, which was one of his big draws coming out of Georgia. So that's not terribly surprising, but overall, the Kenny McIntosh experience has been good. But there is one problem, and it's a problem that could kind of derail our plans here, and Corbin Smith lays it out here in this tweet. Now, this tweet was actually during the game against the Titans. It, I believe, happened right after the sack on Sam Howell, the strip sack, where Stone Forsythe, quote unquote, gave it up, but Kenny McIntosh kind of tripped Stone Forsythe, which caused him to give it up. And that in tandem with the previous week where Kenny McIntosh allowed a sack straight up in blocking, he's struggling with pass protection. So Corbin Smith tweets this out. I'm not impressed at all by Kenny McIntosh in pass pro. He looks lost out there most of the time, which is crazy because that was a strength for him at Georgia. So this is somebody who has watched a lot of the training camp stuff as well. This is not just the two games, because the two games he's had very few opportunities to pass protect. According to PFF, I think he has like two. He's had two pass protection reps. So we're not just talking about two reps. We're talking about a pattern established in camp. And we're talking about a stretch of a extended stretch of opportunities to show that you can pass block. And Kenny McIntosh simply not doing it. So let's try to figure this one out here, because first I want to address this last sentence from Corbin Smith's tweet, which is crazy because that was a strength for him at Georgia. I will say this, PFF does not really agree. And they really don't agree. You go back to 2022 on PFF, they had him down for 27 opportunities to pass block in his final season at Georgia. And while he only allowed one quarterback hurry, which is fine, they thought that his actual performance relative to what he's doing on the football field was very poor. They graded him all the way down at a 29.2. So they thought he was a miserable pass protector. You can see that some of these games where he didn't allow any pressures, he still was graded out terribly. Now, this is probably a little bit of a hiccup with PFF and the way they do things. If a player has 27 opportunities to pass block and only allows one pressure, 29.2 doesn't really pass the smell test. At a certain point, you have to take a step back and think, well, what am I doing here, really? Like, well, what is this? Also, it's a sample size issue. 27 is not that many. So you're only working with a limited set of data here. And I can go back to 2021, where he was graded out much better and allowed zero pressures, but he only had 10 reps, 10 opportunities to even allow a pressure. So we're still dealing with no real data. And then I go back to 2020, he had 10 opportunities, allowed two pressures, and his grade literally scrapes the bottom of the barrel. His grade breaks through the bottom of the barrel and goes all the way to the bottom of the ocean, 2.5. You don't see that every day. And again, it's much easier to get these really, really awful grades when you're only playing a handful of snaps in that situation, which is obviously true here. But the point is, according to PFF, Kenny McIntosh has never been exactly the best pass protector. And if he ends up being unable to pick it up in the NFL, then they would say that was kind of given away by what they saw at the college level. So, first of all, we have to ask, can he get better at this? The answer is absolutely. We see players get better at this kind of stuff all the time. So understand that I'm not throwing in the towel on this particular part of Kenny McIntosh's game. But what I would say is this. For the moment, it's evading him. He's not doing it in practice very much. We've heard multiple people say he's struggling in practice. And in the game, it's been, I mean, we're talking about 2 plays here, but he allowed a sack and he indirectly allowed a sack. And those are like the 2 opportunities he's had. So, yeah, we kind of have a little bit of a problem here. So I want to talk a little bit about how the Seahawks might be able to work around this issue, because we have to assume for now that it is an issue and it needs to be worked around rather than something that isn't actually there that we can just go through. So the most interesting thing about Kenny McIntosh as a player is how the Georgia Bulldogs utilized him in college, where, yes, he was a running back, but he was much more than just a running back. Going back to his final season in college, looking at how he was aligned, and I know my head's kind of blocking some of these numbers here, but you can see the variety of usage here. While Kenny McIntosh lined up in the backfield about 390 times, almost 400, you can see that in pretty much every game he plays, he's lining up at least a few times a game in the slot and a few times a game as a wideout. So 38 reps in the slot and 28 reps in wide. So that is 66 total snaps lined up as a wide receiver. Again, he's doing far more stuff in the backfield, but it's not just the number of snaps. It's what he does when he lines up in that situation. When he lines up in the slot and lines up wide, he's not just a safety valve. He's not just a check down. He's running real wide receiver routes. So the Seattle Seahawks used him as, the Georgia Bulldogs used him as a wide receiver a pretty decent percentage of his of his time there. And the Seattle Seahawks could mimic that, because if you line up as a wide receiver, you don't really have to pass protect, do you? So if you get him on the field in those situations and find a way to get him the ball like that, now you're kind of eliminating the problem while still allowing him to use his dynamic abilities with the ball in his hands. So this is just the most recent college year with him, by the way. You can go back to 2021, and you can see he had 145 snaps in the backfield, and he had 40 as a wide receiver of some kind, be it slot or wide. And then this was 2020. Again, he wasn't playing that much back then, but 128 snaps in the backfield and 19 snaps as a receiver. So those are the creative ways you can use him. And again, he's not going to be limited to just running a couple different routes. He can run wide receiver routes. You just have to let him do it. So that would be solution number 1 to get good stuff out of McIntosh in the meantime. The other solution, and one that I think is a little bit... is obviously losing a little bit of luster right now, but I do want to bring this up. Kenny McIntosh was a part-time kick returner at Georgia. Over 2020 and 2021, he returned 14 kickoffs for a grand total of 375 yards. He wasn't necessarily stellar at it, and when he went to a full-time offensive weapon in 2022, he obviously was taken off the kick return team, but that's just common sense, realistically, and it's something that Georgia trusted him to do. And remember, even if Shenault is one of your kick returners, you need another kick returner, and it's probably not going to be Eskridge or D. Williams because of roster limitations. So you could put Shenault back there and Kenny McIntosh back there, potentially, if you want to have those 2 returners back there, which I think most teams are going to want. Now, he has no experience as a punt returner, which is too bad, because that would take care of an issue as well, because we don't have a punt returner at the moment that is likely to make the team, because I still have my doubts about the D. Williams stuff. We'll talk more about that later this week, maybe. But if you get him the ball in his hands this way, maybe 10 times a year as a kick returner, and get him the ball 3-4 times a game as a wide receiver, and you just make sure that he's only in the backfield for running plays, at least, a large percentage of the time, and you allow him to run routes out of the backfield rather than blocking, you can find ways to minimize this problem. to where he's only going to have to block maybe a couple times a month. All right, so that's what I wanted to talk about here. I wanted to establish that this is a unique player, and we don't have to look at him the way we look at most other running backs. For a lot of other running backs, the inability to block, the inability to pass protect would be a little bit of a deal breaker. Does not have to be with Kenny McIntosh. Does not. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think down below. Yeah, it's a problem. It is a real problem. I mean, Corbin Smith, if you guys follow him, you know he's generally a very positive person when it comes to Seahawks stuff. So for him to call something out in the negative like this means that there's something there. It's not just made up out of nowhere. All right. Might be another video later today. If not, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Go Hawks, and let me know what you think down below about Kenny McIntosh's future on the Seahawks.